So our second episode opens with Daenerys feeling all depressed that she's in the Dothraki Sea. This is actually in direct opposition to the book. As I mentioned in part 1, Daenerys is constantly thinking about this house with the red door. The green fields of the Dothraki Sea, for some reason, remind her of this house. They remind her of home. And just like at the house with the red door, Viserys isn't happy there. This is kind of the whole relationship between Daenerys and Viserys. Daenerys feels home as the house with the red door, or the Dothraki Sea, while Viserys thinks home is the Iron Throne. Daenerys wants happiness and freedom, while Viserys wants power and control. Now we briefly get a glimpse of Daenerys' 3 servants, Irri, Jiqui, and Doreah. What's important to know about these 3 characters is that they were given to Daenerys by Illyrio. Additionally, other than Jorah, they are the only 3 people that can speak the common tongue. This means that Daenerys and Viserys are completely surrounded by Illyrio's creatures. Viserys and Daenerys have no way to communicate to Khal Drogo or the other Dothraki directly. Jorah is really the one that has all of the power. Imagine if he were a Littlefinger type character. And who's to say he's not? Now we get a few asides between Viserys and Jorah in our story, but let's keep in mind that in the book it's only Daenerys' perspective on everything. This is important later on as the truth gets messier. Now this scene is all about the background of Jorah. He tells Viserys that he was exiled for selling slaves. Now Jorah fell into slavery because he had money troubles, and he had money troubles because his wife spent too much money, and his wife happened to look exactly like Daenerys. We're not sure if Illyrio picked Jorah in part because he had a fetish for silver-haired young girls. What's interesting about this scene as well is that Viserys said he wouldn't punish Jorah for his slaving. Valyrians were traditionally slavers and only gave up the practice when they came to the Seven Kingdoms. Now the show really likes to make Tyrion look like a drunk. Not that he isn't, but it should be noted that everyone else is a drunk too. And there's a reason for this. Many of the characters keep having crazy dreams, and these dreams may be caused by other characters through magic. Alcohol and various other medicines from maesters can repress these dreams. Now it should be noted that Tyrion doesn't wake up in a sty like in the show. He's actually in a library. Winterfell actually has a really incredible library, and it later burns down, which means Tyrion has read some books that no longer exist. Tyrion's unique knowledge of history may play a role later on. Now this is our introduction to Joffrey. Now in the book he's a little less of a wuss. There's even a scene where he sword fights with Robb, and the two are about the same skill level. Now the scene between Joffrey and Tyrion is rather interesting. Tyrion orders Joffrey to give his condolences to the Starks about Bran. Joffrey doesn't want to, so Tyrion hits him. Now we find out later that Joffrey hires a catspaw to attack Bran. Fans of the book are still scratching their head over the logic, and the motive that they give in the book, that he wanted to impress his dad King Robert, just doesn't fit. So many people look to this scene as the motive and foreshadowing of the attack. In the book, Joffrey is upset about being kept up all night by Bran's wolf, and so he ponders sending his dog to kill Bran's dog. I don't really get how this is foreshadowing. Joffrey hires a catspaw to kill Bran, and Bran wasn't the one making noise, and Joffrey's no longer in town. I personally don't see any foreshadowing or motive. Other people argue that perhaps Joffrey is trying to get back at Tyrion, but then again, why use Littlefinger's dagger? And would Joffrey really think Tyrion cared about Bran? I personally think that Joffrey's attack of Bran is something that has no foreshadowing and little logic, and that's okay. George R.R. Martin occasionally has to throw something in there to really surprise us. It's the chaos element. Of course, our story leads us to believe that Cersei or Jaime attacked Bran. In both the show and the book, Cersei uses the same language that the catspaw uses, a mercy. It's a complete misdirect. Now next we're treated to an extra scene in the show where Cersei visits Katalin to talk about Bran. Now in this scene she reveals that she actually had a child with Robert, but it died of a fever. Now in the book this never happens. Cersei only takes moon tea to have abortions. One of the big mysteries about the story is whether or not Cersei is evil enough to kill children. We have a few stories from people like Littlefinger and Varys that she is evil enough to kill children, but we don't have any firm confirmation. Don't get me wrong, Cersei is really evil. But what's kind of funny is that we initially think Cersei is evil because we think she killed Jon Arryn and attacked Bran, 2 things she's actually innocent of. And she didn't even want to kill Ned. In the end though, her character goes straight off the deep end, yet we still don't know if she actually kills children. And next we're treated to a scene between Jaime and John about the Night's Watch. This isn't in the book and it's a bit odd as Jaime mocks the Night's Watch, an organization that's almost identical to the Kingsguard. Now Jaime's whole conflict is that of vows, and I could see him mocking John in his head or in private. After all, John's character isn't that different from Brienne. But at this point of the story, he's still trying to put up the charade that he's a normal Kingsguard. Mocking vow-based organizations is probably not a smart move. Now next we have a scene where John gives Arya Needle. This scene is now insanely creepy, knowing that George R.R. Martin originally intended for there to be a romance between John and Arya. Now next we have the scene between John and Katalin. If you think Kat is unfairly mean in this scene, keep in mind in the book it's much worse. In the history of John's life, Kat has never called him by his name, only bastard. After John says goodbye to Bran, Katalin says to him, "John, it should have been you." Now next, Kat gives Ned some grief for leaving. Now I mentioned this last time, but again, in the books, Kat wanted Ned to go. The Tully's motto is family, duty, honor. Kat has an obligation to her sister to solve the Jon Arryn murder mystery. The fact that she sent Ned to King's Landing haunts her. Now in the show we're treated to this extra scene about Jon's mother between Jon and Ned. Now there are essentially 4 leading candidates for who Jon's mother is. There's Lyanna, Ned's sister, there's Ashara Dane, a woman that Ned was in love with, there's Wylla, and there's the fisherman's daughter. Ned shows a lot of pain in this scene, so a lot of fans say that this eliminates the fisherman's daughter and Wylla as options. However, there's plenty to be upset about related to Lyanna and Ashara. That is, if the show and the book have the same result. Now this Wylla is a bit of a mystery, as Ned claims Wylla is Jon's mother. We later learn that Wylla was a wet nurse down in Starfall, where Ashara Dane lives. And we hear about this news from a boy named Ned Dane. So the mystery of Jon's mother is a lot more complicated than it seems. Many people look at the situation and say, hey, Lyanna had a mystery baby, and Jon has a mystery mother, 1 + 1 = 2. But smack dab in the mystery of Jon's birth is Ashara Dane and the story of Starfall, which no one knows. Ned goes out of his way to visit Starfall and Ashara Dane after Robert's rebellion, supposedly to return a sword. What exactly happened in Starfall is anyone's guess. And to make things even more confusing, Ashara also had a mystery baby. Now what's also interesting about this scene is that it takes place in the Barrowlands. This is the place where the kings before the Starks are buried. So it's interesting that there was a conscious change in burial customs. It's also interesting that Ned and Robert have gone from talking in a crypt to talking in a graveyard. And then there's this scene. It should be noted that in the book, Khal Drogo only has a mustache. The show has replaced Dany's dragon dreams with a mystical connection to her eggs. Not that Dany doesn't have a weird relationship with her eggs, but the eggs remind her of her dreams. The dragon dreams make her fear and her pain go away, and she also heals faster. Now next we have this scene between Tyrion and John. Now what's been left out is that Tyrion reveals that he was plagued with dreams of dragons when he was young. Just like Daenerys, he dreams of fire, dragons, and his family. Now next we have this interesting scene with Maester Luwin asking Katalin to make some appointments. Now later in the book we're introduced to the idea that the Maesters are prime manipulators. A few characters even accuse them of killing off the dragons and starting Robert's rebellion. As healers they gain the family's trust, as tutors they control what the children learn, as advisors they can manipulate the lords, and they even control communication with the ravens. In this scene, Luwin is actually kind of running Winterfell. He certainly knows more about what's going on than Katalin or Robb. And in the book he's even more manipulative. In this scene he's trying to get appointments made, but in the book it's appointments made from a pre-selected list that he's already prepared. Robb mentions that there's a fire, but what's left out is that it's the library that's on fire. Centuries of knowledge have been lost, and Tyrion may be the only one alive with at least some notion of what's in these books. And then the Catspaw arrives and says it's a mercy, he's dead already. Now as I said before, the language misdirects us to Cersei, and in the 3rd book both Tyrion and Jaime both decide that Joffrey sent him. Since there's no mention of him in the 4th and 5th book, and because George R.R. Martin said that the solution would be revealed in the 3rd book, many fans have accepted that Joffrey did send the Catspaw. That said, it feels like there's still more to the Catspaw than there appears. On his dead body they find a bag of silver, which is what Mance Rayder said he brought to Winterfell. And the plan seems to fall so easily into Littlefinger's scheming. And he noticeably smells really bad, which reminds us of servants of the Boltons. Perhaps these are all misdirects, but perhaps there's more. Back in the Dothraki Sea, we have Daenerys and her servants talking about dragons. Jorah has told Dany that her eggs are from Asshai, and yet her slaves tell her that there are no dragons in Asshai. So where did her eggs come from? Now her slaves start talking about dragon legends. Darius says that according to the Qartheen, the sun and the moon got too close. The moon cracked, dragons came forth, and drank the sun's fire. Irri and Jiqui, though, say that the moon and the sun are gods, and that they are man and wife. Now let's consider both of these legends, and let's also consider the fact that Khal Drogo calls Daenerys moon of his life, and she calls him her sun and stars. Were Daenerys' slaves correct? Did the moon and the sun come together? Did Dany hatch dragons that drank Khal Drogo's fire? Now after some sleuthing that's not in the book, Katalin decides that the Lannisters are responsible for attacking Bran. Now in the book she's in bed and everyone comes to her, but in the show she goes to the Godswood. Not that this changes too much, but a scene in the Godswood implies that Bloodraven is watching. Now it always bugged me that Theon was part of this conversation, as Katalin definitely doesn't trust Theon. I guess in the book it's harder to ask Theon to leave the room, but I certainly could never imagine Katalin inviting Theon to a secret meeting in the Godswood. Now the show has added some hands-on erotic teaching from Doreah and some serious sexual tension. In the book, Doreah only tells Dany about sex. Now later Daenerys actually has regular sex with her handmaiden Irri, but the show weirdly removes that. By the way, in the book Doreah kind of looks like Daenerys because she's from a city called Lys, which was inhabited by Valyrians. It's not really important, but Doreah doesn't really fit in with Irri and Jiqui, who are both Dothraki. Now Dany has some face-to-face sex with Khal Drogo, and it's this sex in which their child is conceived. In the book though, they have sex outside, and this is rather important. The Dothraki believe that everything important is done beneath the stars. This parallels the First Men who believe important things are done in front of heart trees. So we know in the North that when the trees are watching, it's actually Bloodraven watching. Dany's story parallels Bran's a bit. Bran is sent dreams by Bloodraven in order to awaken his powers, and he's watched by trees. Dany is also sent dreams to awaken her powers and is watched by the stars. So who is Dany's Bloodraven? Well, it's probably Quaithe, that masked woman from Season 2. Now the next scenes take place around Castle Darry. House Darry is the biggest Targaryen supporter in the realm. In fact, in the book we find out that they only took down their Targaryen banners right before King Robert arrived. A Jonathor Darry was in Aerys' Kingsguard, and a Willem Darry took care of Viserys and Dany. So let's keep in mind that when the Lannisters, Baratheons, and Starks start having a dispute at Castle Darry, the Darrys must be very happy. Now Sansa runs into Ilyn Payne, who stares at her weirdly. Now we're not 100% sure of Ilyn's loyalties, but in the book we find out that he's on Littlefinger's payroll. So this may explain his weird interest in Sansa. Now next in our story, Joffrey goes off with Sansa. It should be noted that in the book, Joffrey asks for Lady to be left behind. Joffrey clearly doesn't like those direwolves. Sansa and Joffrey run into Arya and Mycah practicing. Now there's a reason that these four have run into each other where they did. This is the location that Rhaegar and Robert fought during Robert's rebellion, and Robert killed Rhaegar. According to the story, Rhaegar had rubies on the front of his armor, and Robert smashed the armor with his warhammer. Rubies went flying everywhere. So Arya and Mycah were looking for lost rubies. Joffrey was trying to impress Sansa by showing him the spot where his dad killed Rhaegar. Now the show really plays down the conflict. In the book, Arya hits Joffrey so hard that the back of his head is bloody. And Joffrey doesn't just receive a dog bite, his hand is seriously mangled. And Arya goes missing for 4 days. The point being, there are much higher stakes involved, and Cersei's request that Lady be executed is kind of reasonable. The direwolves are larger in the book and much more dangerous. I mean, imagine if the Starks wanted to bring a grizzly bear to court insisting it was safe, even after one attacked the prince. Now sadly, a very important line has been cut from the show that Sansa speaks. I promise. Now Sansa is promising to raise Lady well, to raise her good and tame away from her direwolf nature. And this hits Ned hard, as it reminds him of the promise that he made to Lyanna. Was Ned promising to raise a Targaryen child away from its nature of cruelty and craziness? It's hard to say. And was there a swap that went on, just like Nymeria and Lady? Again, we don't know. And that's episode 1.2. We'll see you in episode 1.3.